And welcome to Greenlight Ventures presentation of Bury Your Bookie, another fine edition. I'm Jeff Deforrest. We don't know if it's going to be fine yet, but glad to have you guys with us here on NoFilter.net and the other platforms that carry the show. I'm Jeff Deforrest, and we're going to attempt to step out there and give you a little bit of a preview, a look at how to bet the NFL season. A couple of ways that you can go about it without necessarily burying yourself in the process. Participate in a lot of action and get in all kinds of good stuff. And available right now with the fine people at Bet Online. In fact, Bet Online is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for everything football. And they have a couple of things we're going to talk about here today that you can get involved in, and you're going to have to get involved quickly because the season's about to get underway manana. BetOnline has every stat, every matchup, and even live odds and spreads to bet on during the games, which is something else we're going to allude to here on the program. If you think you know your stuff, get in on the $200,000 mega contest. And it's a good one. You pick 5 games against the spread. Remember, like Westgate started this thing, and it was a big deal, and you win like $1 million, winner take all. If I guess there's a possibility a couple of people make it through the entire season. Is that even remotely possible in a survivor pool without losing at any time during the year? But at that point, you're chopping up a big piece of cash here if that happens. But right now, $200,000 at stake at Bet Online. When the game's over, you can head on over to the online casino. You can play blackjack. You can play poker. Over 150 slot games available. My wife would love that. Head to the website today to get in on all the action. Bet Online. The game starts here. All right, we are now just a day away, a day and change away from the start of the NFL season. The Chiefs are going to get it on against the Baltimore Ravens. The Chiefs hosting the Ravens, and surprisingly, that line opened up at 3 points, and it's staying right there, ladies and gentlemen. But it does seem like there's a sentiment out there that the Chiefs are perfectly capable of three-peating. I would imagine the odds are overwhelmingly against that, especially in the era of salary caps and parity that's been persistent in the NFL for the longest period of time. So we'll see. And a big element of luck goes into that. But I wanted to get into this. I mean, a lot of people are critical of social media. One thing I love about social media, and I grew up in Brooklyn. I was born there in 1951, Brooklyn, New York. There were 3 Major League Baseball teams. We were huge sports fans by the time that we were 4 or 5 years old. And yet, even with my memory and ability to visualize things, and I'm sure you people do this too, you go back and you visualize some period of your past, and you can picture yourself playing marbles or flipping baseball cards or essentially being a degenerate gambler before the age of 5. And yet, that being said, I don't remember. There was the thing, who's the better center fielder in New York, Mickey, Willie, or the Duke? They even wrote songs about that. Mickey, Willie, and the Duke. Is that the order they put them in? I think that's the order I would have put them in. But yeah, you had the Brooklyn Dodgers there. You had the Brooklyn Dodgers, right? The New York Giants and the New York Yankees. And yet, as a kid, I only remember being a Yankee fan. That's all I remember. We knew everybody on the team. There wasn't much transition back then. And I don't recall really missing the fact, that the Giants and the Dodgers had up and left town. And I had to be like 7 years old at the time. But we didn't give a fuck about them. We were all Yankee fans all the way. The Yankees had sensational teams. And it was easy to root for them. I mean, think about this. They had a guy that was platooning at catcher, the great Elston Howard, who was an American League MVP, led the American League in batting, a 12-time All-Star, a 6-time world champion, and yet is not in the Hall of Fame. He's a backup catcher, platooning with Yogi Berra, the great Yogi Berra, and the third-string catcher is Johnny Blanchard, one of the all-time great pinch hitters, who would get 20 home runs a season even though he had a limited number of at-bats. That's how great the team was stacked, the New York Yankees. So when the Giants left, no big deal. Dodgers left, we didn't care. We had the Yankees. We rooted for them all the time. And eventually that would change in 1962 as I sent my allegiance in the direction of the hapless and fun to root for Bad News Bears New York Mets, who won 40 games, went 40 and 120. But up until that time, I was a Yankee fan. So I can relate to some of this, although it's distant in the past, my allegiance to the New York Yankees. I guess I don't mind seeing them do well. But I'm not one of the legions of fans that absolutely despises the New York Yankees. There are teams that are universally hated. Yankees, there's no middle ground with the Yankees. You either love them or you can't wait to see them lose every game. But what I love now about social media, which is great, is that you get the fetching and the bitching and the whining from New York Yankee fans after virtually every loss. Now the Yankees dropped to a half game behind the Baltimore Orioles last night in the American League East, and they did this. And there's a betting angle to it, which I think you would have prospered greatly because who doesn't wait for Aaron Boone? This is one of the constant complaints and laments of Yankee fans that Aaron Boone might be the worst manager in the history of Major League Baseball. That if George Steinbrenner was alive today, he would rather dig up the dead body of Billy Martin and put him on the bench than have Aaron Boone having anything to do with decision making involving the team. The Yankees have been using Clayton Holmes as a closer for most of the season and just recently reconsidered that position after yet another, in this case, it was his 10th blown save of the year. And then we get to last night. Yankees are trailing the Rangers 4-3 in the ninth inning. They bring in Clayton Holmes. Brilliant decision. Rodon had one hit the Texas Rangers through 6 innings. They went through the usual routine of relievers. They got their 7th inning guy in there. He does fine. The 8th inning guy, he gets touched up a little bit. And now you're going to put the ball in the hands of Clayton Holmes. Now, if you're at Bet Online and you see this, you will get amazing odds going into the final inning with a team that's trailing, in this case, the Texas Rangers, even by a single run. All of a sudden, you're looking at odds of like 4 or 5 to 1 in this spot. And so if you have Clayton Holmes coming into the game, who wouldn't dive on that? Because you would have cashed 10 times previously, and you would have cashed again last night. He gets the first guy out, gives up a single, walks a couple of guys, and then boom, here comes a meatball with tomato sauce over spaghetti right over the middle of the plate. And a rookie, Wyatt Langford, knocks it out of the park for a walk-off grand slam. And the Rangers end up beating the Yankees and Clayton Holmes for the 11th time. He has 5 losses, but that counts as part of his blown saves. So 11 times you could have gone to the well, got somewhere between, he's coming in with either a tie ball game or anywhere up to a 3-run lead, usually only in save situations. And he's blowing it as a matter of routine. You would be a rich man today, but you had to kind of anticipate this happening at the beginning of the year, and yet it consistently snake bites the New York Yankees, and this screaming is incessant on social media today. It's just absolutely a thing of beauty. So if you're treading onto any kind of social media, you will see effigy hangings of Aaron Boone, Brian Cashman, the question that's automatically associated with him. As soon as you say Brian Cashman, what's the first thing you think? How does he keep his job? This Hal Steinbrenner must be one mellow cat by comparison to his father, George, who I got to know through the horse racing industry because he was a horse owner with Kinsman Stable and also an owner at one time of the racetrack Tampa Bay Downs and also a frequent visitor to many racetracks around South Florida. So got to know Steinbrenner in a different light. He was a completely different guy outside of this whole Yankee persona that he projected as being this hard-ass businessman, which he may well have been, but he was a very mellow cat away from there when he was involved in the horse racing business. I don't think that he would stand for what's going on right now. But anyway, if you wanted to take a little taste against Clayton Holmes, it would be advisable almost each and every time. We have the NFL season going to get underway tomorrow night. We mentioned the Chiefs and the Ravens going at it. I have a good friend put a substantial wager right away as soon as the line came out on the Kansas City Chiefs laying 3 against the Baltimore Ravens. The evidence on the table would be Kansas City maybe a little bit improved in terms of their receiving core. Just cutting Kadarius Toney would probably put them in. That was addition by subtraction, was it not? They get some speed. They drafted this kid who can flat out fly. Got Marquise Brown to help out Patrick Mahomes. And would appear to be in better shape offensively than they were even last year when they won the Super Bowl. They dismantled, humiliated the league MVP, Lamar Jackson, the last time out. And that was in the postseason. I don't know that anybody could have anticipated that kind of decimation, this discombobulation of the Baltimore Ravens and reducing Lamar Jackson to not even looking ordinary. This guy looked like a scrub quarterback in that game and was seemingly lost, confused greatly by the Kansas City defense. And Kansas City goes on to win the Super Bowl thereafter. But what's changed between last year and this year, the postseason game? And if anything, the one thing that's changed is the site. So it doesn't seem. I'm very curious that line is just hovered at 3 from the outset. But I do have a friend who has bet substantial amounts of money that is a firm believer that the Chiefs will prevail in the spot, laying 3 points. There are a lot of different things you can get into. And one of them on Bet Online, and we've mentioned this before in their ads and the spots for betonline.com, is the Survivor Pool, which is a great way to play the football season. I had a friend many years ago did a radio show here. He was one of the original degenerates on the air. Gentlemen, may be familiar in degenerate circles out there. If you're a devout, diehard gambler, you might have heard of my buddy. He had some national presence, a gentleman named Ed Kaplan. And he introduced me to this concept years ago on his show, where people were always talking about betting games against the spread. And he wanted to bring out and illustrate to people how impossible most NFL betting actually is. And so he introduced his own version of the Survivor Pool on the air. Now, I couldn't play it for money, so he gave some prize away to the person who would last the longest into the season. And he would get hundreds and hundreds of entrants into the Survivor Pool, where you pick one team each week, no point spread involved. You pick one team to win straight up each week. The catch is, and the thing that makes it prohibitive as you get further into the season, is that you can't use a team once you've used them. In other words, if you go with the Miami Dolphins in week number 1, you can't use them again for the rest of the year. Most people understand the concept here, just explaining for the uninitiated. So it's great because what Ed Kaplan was able to illustrate very coherently was that it's almost impossible. Guys that would routinely be eliminated, almost the entire pool would be eliminated by the time you got to like week number 3 or week number 4. Very, very difficult proposition. A lot of fun if you can do it. And I go back, the first time I actually played in a Survivor Pool was 2003. And in 2003, now your natural tendency, if you're looking at the games that are on the board this week, and you go by one of our other diehard, devout principles here on Bury Your Bookie, and that is don't get cute. Whatever you do, don't get cute. If you're in a situation where you have a chance to win, and this is called Survivor, it's a Jim Valvano thing, survive and move on. Just like the NCAA tournament, you just have to win. But don't worry about next week in Survivor pools and start planning a year-long strategy. Well, I'll use the Vikings in week 13. You don't know that you're going to get there. You have to get there first. So you want to take, I think, the one game that is the most blatantly obvious on the board, and that's what most people do. In this case, it would be the Bengals, who, in the terms of point spreads, are laying 8.5 to the hapless Patriots. Patriots with a new coach, no Belichick. They don't have a quarterback. They're going to start Jacoby Brissett. They're going to go on the road. They're unlikely to win more than 4 games this season. Most people are on the under on 4 and a hook, I think, is the number going into the year. They didn't display anything in the preseason, although I don't know that you can deduce anything of any significance from watching preseason football. And especially now, I mean, where they've really distilled it down to absolute nothing. No bite to the preseason whatsoever. I don't know that you can come to any conclusions about any teams. In essence, if you're betting these games, you should always consider that, especially the first couple of weeks, it basically is the preseason for a lot of these teams. Young teams that are coming together, teams with a lot of new personnel, teams with new quarterbacks. They're not going to be offensively in sync early in the year. If they are, then they have one dynamo of a motivator as a head coach. But in this case, you're figuring the Patriots aren't going to win 4 games this year. The Bengals should be among the contenders, kind of a sleeper, if you will, in spite of the fact that they have Joe Burrow and wide receiving core that is a standout and can put points on the board. And they seem to be able to perform very well in a clutch if Burrow is healthy. You would have to think that the Bengals, that there is no way with veritable certainty you could assure yourself that they are going to beat the Patriots in week number 1. I might go into this with a strategy, and I hate to give you the most obvious game because I was considering another game as my pick, and there's a reason for it, a rationale behind it. That maybe if you're in this Survivor Pool situation, you dodge that game, and this is perhaps getting cute, but you have to have a strong belief in another game on the board. I sort of do. I believe the Dolphins will handle the Jacksonville Jaguars at home in week number 1. Now, if you're tossing out the point spread of 3 and a hook, which would make that bet obviously substantially more prohibitive because not only do you have the field goal differential that you have to account for, but then what looms as a harpoon, a sword of Damocles, a dagger right in your back. You're going to feel like you got knifed in the back by that hook. The 3.5 is always the danger. Some people say go ahead and buy that half a point so you don't have to deal with the neurosis that follows losing a game when your team goes ahead and holds up a field goal margin and you end up on the losing side. That gets into another theory that we've espoused on the program, which is never lay points. But in this case, you don't have to. So I'm thinking back to 2003 when the Houston Texans came to Miami, and that was the biggest discrepancy in terms of point spreads on the board for anybody in a survivor pool. I got into a survivor pool, had about 100 people in it. And I don't know what it was. It might have been like $100 a person. So where you're talking about 10 dimes if you win the thing. And it's winner take all. And sure enough, the first game that everybody was playing, they looked at the biggest discrepancy, just like we were talking about with the Bengals and the Patriots, 8.5 points. In this case, it was double digits. The Houston Texans were horrible. They were a second-year team out of expansion, and would appear to have had no shot coming to Miami to take on a Miami Dolphins team that had begun to show some promise in spite of the fact that they had Jay Fiedler at quarterback. Jay Fiedler, a very, competent and a serious athlete, but not the greatest quarterback in Dolphin history. He's not going to erase the memories of Dan Marino, although he was asked to do so. So anyway, 2003, Houston comes in here. Fiedler throws a couple of picks late in the game. Houston scores off a field goal off an interception, takes a 1-point lead in the game, 21-20, late in the ball game. Dolphins still have the ball and a chance to go ahead and win the game. And Fiedler throws another pick, and that ices it. I remember being on the sideline as that pick was taking place, and my friends and I are celebrating while the rest of the crowd leaves in total depression. And then what we realized was that of the 100 people, 87 of them had taken the Dolphins over the Texans in the first week of the survivor pool and were eliminated. And we were down to 13 entrants now from 100 going into week number 2 because my buddy and I had decided to go against that. And I think we had the Chicago Bears who eked out a victory over a weak team in week number 1. And we went on and ended up winning the pool just by going against the grain. So I'm going to make a recommendation here that if you're in a survivor pool, I believe the Dolphins, they were like a track team, the Miami Dolphins, and they're sprinters. They're definitely not distance runners. We've seen them go and do the old Federuski in the last couple of seasons, that atrocious loss that cost them positioning in the playoffs and forced them to go on the road in the opening round. What was disgusting last year when they lost to the Tennessee Titans at home late in the season. They haven't been good closers, but out of the gate, man, I mean, remember that beatdown they put on the Denver Broncos and Sean Payton last year where they scored 70 points? These guys are going to come flying like a circus act out of the gate. And it's going to look like, I believe, the Globetrotters are going against the Washington Generals in this one. I'm not sure. I don't know that I could name you. I probably could if I thought about it. Another Jaguars player besides Trevor Lawrence, a kid with a bad haircut but a big arm. Doug Peterson comes back as a head coach. They seem to be underachievers for the amount of accolades that they had accrued when Peterson first took over and seemed to turn the fortunes of the franchise around. Who couldn't? After what Urban Meyer did with the Jacksonville Jaguars. What a mess. Almost anybody could come in there and clean that up. Peterson did a nice job. Trevor Lawrence looked like he was emerging as the prospect that we all thought that he would be coming out of LSU. Guy can definitely play the game, but I think the Dolphins at home, especially dangerous. Week number 1, you don't have the weather differential there where like the Bills come to town and they melt in the hot sun in September because Jacksonville is a Florida team, although not quite this blast furnace weather that conditions that usually exist. And it's hot as fuck on the field there. I've stood on the field during games when I was doing some announcing on the field. And, man, I mean, it's like 110 degrees on the playing field there. So I don't know that Jacksonville has the meltdown factor in this game, but I don't see them coming out with a win. So I'm going to say if you're in a survivor pool, and you can get in on it still at Bet Online, a winner-take-all survivor pool, which I think was going to be worth somewhere in the neighborhood of $300,000. It's a nice score. I'm going to go ahead and hope everybody gets eliminated by a miracle with the Patriots beating the Bengals, which I'm not predicting that will happen. But if it does somehow, because with the Dolphins going down in week number 1 in 2003, that opened the door for a clear path to riches in these survivor pools. I'm going to go ahead and play the Dolphins in a survivor pool. We're going to start one right here. We'll try to go as deep into the season as we can. We're going to go Dolphins in week number 1 over the Jacksonville Jaguars survivor pool, and would even consider laying the 3 and a hook. But we'll have to take that into further examination as the week progresses. And we're joined by some of our handicappers. By the way, dynamite job by the professor last week. He'll be on with us on Friday. The professor with his college football, 4-1, and he even made a suggestion on another game that hit FAU, who would be a viable play to look at. I think that line has actually climbed a point from where it was yesterday. FAU, Florida Atlantic University, a little bit obscure, but you might be looking for Tom Herman to possibly emerge as a candidate. You would have to think if this Gator season for the Florida Gators continues along the lines that it did start with in week number 1 against the Miami Hurricanes, you would have to think that Billy Napier is gone. Tom Herman would be a viable candidate, I would imagine. And he's a great guy. Mensa candidate who went into coaching. So a real articulate gentleman. Pulled off a cover of the spread in week number 1 against Michigan State on the road with a relatively new FAU team after a lot of turnover from last year. Everybody swipes the good players off these kind of squads, but Herman has been able to sustain what he had going. And going against Army, laying now 3 and a hook. I think it was 2 and a hook yesterday. So the steam is coming in on FAU. But we'll track that game for you. And we'll have the professor on college football on Friday. And then, of course, coming up tomorrow, we'll have Troy West. I had to reschedule from today, Troy West. Still zeroing in on baseball. Would have been nice to take that Clay Holmes. As soon as he's like a clay pigeon, man. As soon as he comes in there, boom. You just take the double barrel shotgun, put them right out of the sky there, and end up cashing a ticket at anywhere from 5-1 to maybe even more, depending on the amount of lead that you had going in. Walk-off grand slam yesterday. The Yankee fans are absolutely crying in their beer. Good stuff coming up. U.S. Open. We could have made some money yesterday. Kind of liked Emma Navarro in her matchup against Paula Badosa. Paula Badosa coming off the back injury, but Navarro playing great. And Taylor Fritz, this is set up what would be first time, I think, since 2009 that we might have an American man. We will have an American man in the finals because Francis Tiafoe is going to face off against Fritz in the semifinals of the U.S. Open. That would have been a nice bet to make. Would an American appear in the finals of the U.S. Open, and now that is a veritable certainty, you would be cashing that ticket. Fritz playing great tennis, I would imagine, will be a slight favorite over Tiafoe. He's more highly ranked. He's highly or higher seeded, and is just striping the ball. I mean, he was brilliant against very tough Zverev yesterday in the quarterfinals, and now in the semifinals against Francis Tiafoe, who prevailed over Gregor Dimitrov, who has been playing great tennis, kind of resurrected his career, seemed to be given up for dead, and now has come back and distinguished himself with a lot of strong performances in majors and Masters 1000 tournaments. So, a very, very heartening situation for American tennis to know that an American man is going to be in the singles finals, going to have to face the winner of the Sinner-Medvedev matchup. And both of those guys will be very tough outs for whoever survives in the All-American semifinal. All right, we're going to run. Thanks so much for being with us. We did want to mention, too, on the Bet Online thing, one of the great ways to play the professional football season is to go ahead and get involved in their Pick 5 pool, which, that really rewards the shrewd handicapper. As I mentioned, it started with, I think, the Westgate competition. Now there are a couple of different ones out of Las Vegas where you can pay an entry fee and walk away with $1 million. Picking 5 games against the spread all season long. You have to grind out. You have to make those 2 and 3 bad weeks your worst weeks. You don't want to blank and go 0-5. And it's a very challenging competition if you can stay alive in that. We're going to bring you later on in the season Mark Lawrence, who has won the Westgate competition in the past, and he'll be one of our handicappers that we feature on a regular basis here on Bury Your Bookie as we get into the college and professional football season with the pros kicking it off tomorrow night. So tread, faithfully, people. We think we're going to play the Dolphins in our survivor pool in week number 1. We're going to just ignore the fact that maybe you play against the Patriots the first several weeks of the season. I mean, do they not get off to an horrendous start? You would have to say yes. So you could use that strategy playing against a team. But we're hoping that somehow they pull off a miracle against the Bengals, eliminate most of the people in the competition right away. And we're going to go ahead and put our money on the Dolphins. Week number 1 in the Survivor pool that we started right here today on Bury Your Bookie. All right, a lot of fun being with you. Thanks so much. Watch for the bitching by the Yankee fans, and let's hope they keep bringing in Clayton Holmes in these situations. 11 blown saves in spots where you could have made a substantial score betting against this guy, and maybe that's the way to go to approach all of the action. Not so much to count on the teams that you think have a shot, but to make sure that you bury the teams that you know are perennial losers and always come up on the wrong side of things. We'll see you next time. Thanks so much for tuning in. I'm Jeff Deforrest. Thanks so much for joining us as Greenlight Ventures presents Bury Your Bookie.